Next up, I'm going to make the handle and the trays for the box. So the handle is just a piece of wood that sticks out a little bit there. And you can see it's mortised into the top edge of the front here. So I'll use a jig similar to what I use for the mortises or for the hinges to make that. And then the trays, I'll cover that when I'm done with the handle. So this particular handle, I believe the material is Shedua, which is I think a nice contrast to the curly maple and the sycamore. This box I'm working on now with the walnut and sycamore, something brown I think is going to blend in too much with the walnut. I do have some rosewood here, but you can see that's pretty much the same color. I think it might darken up a little more when I put some finish on it, but I think I want something more contrasty. So I've got some ebony. It's already roughly 1/8 of an inch thick, and I think that will look nice there. So I'm going to make the jig first to route the mortise, and then I'll cut this to match the jig. I could do it the other way. I think it doesn't really matter which way I do it, jig first or handle first, but because I'm going to use the jig for 2 boxes, I have that other box that I had from previously, I'm just going to make the jig and then make a couple of handles using this same material. I'm set up to make the first cut in my template, so that's going to be this cut here. So I'm going to raise the blade up and then lower it back down. So you can see I've got that held down really well. It's held down and it's held from coming back, and I'll just raise the blade up and come back down. I do have a video on doing this and setting it up, which I'll post at some point. To make the other 2 cuts, I'm going to use my sled. I've got this laid out 1.5 inches wide, and I'm going to use a stop just to make sure it's centered, because I cut this the same size as my box. So I just need to center this on the box, and then I'll know my handle will be centered. I've got my handle material cut, or at least sanded to thickness. Now I kept it long. I want to keep it as long as possible, just so I have something to hang on to. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to shoot one end here, and then I'll cut it to length, roughly to length, to match the jig. I'll cut it a little bit big, and then I'll shoot it to match, and then the last thing I'll do is cut the curve on the front edge. So I've got a little miter box here that I'll use to cut this. Okay, that fits in there nicely now. So I'll go ahead and route the mortise. I've got the jig in place now. Now remember, I said I cut it to the same width as the box. So all I had to do was center it on here and make sure it was straight. This way I can just kind of eyeball that, looking at these lines back here. I'm using a small pattern bit, and to set the depth, I just took my handle and the remainder of the handle, I set the router on top of there and adjusted it till the bit was just touching that. So that should give me the right depth. And I'll go ahead and route that out. Now, one thing I want to do before I route that, as the bit is spinning, when it cuts at this front side on the right and the back side on the left, it's going, because of the bit rotation, it's going to want to tear that out. So I'm going to take my chisel and make a little knife cut there Be a little harder in there. Maybe I can get my marking knife in there, but that's not quite as important as the front. But I'll go ahead and mark that, and then I'll go ahead and route it out. All right, let's check this. That fits in there nice. It's just a teeny bit proud, but I can sand that down to match the rest of this. But that looks great. So what I'm going to do next is I'll mark a curve on there, and I think I'm just going to go to my disc sander and just sand that curve and round it a little bit, and I'll be ready to put it on. I drew a curve on here just using a compass. That radius looked about right. Probably should have been a little bit smaller, but I think it's going to be fine. So now I've just, very carefully, just by dragging these across, these are, coarser to finer grits here. So right now it's pretty square there. I'm going to put just a little bit of like a thumbnail profile on there, and then we'll be ready to glue it on. So just a little. So I'm finishing this with some paper just held by hand, and just, this is, I think this is 400. So this ebony kind of polishes up nicely, and I'm going to finish with 600, and then I'll see if I can show a picture of this up close when it's all done. I'm ready to glue the handle on now. It's all sanded and ready to go. I did sand it just a touch more to get it a slightly thinner so it fit just a little bit better. So I don't know if it really matters that much on something this small, but I did wipe off the back of this with acetone, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue here. I mean, there's hardly any load on this thing, so I'm not too concerned about it, but I don't want squeeze out the front, so I'm going to kind of get rid of most of this glue, and that should be all right. Maybe just get a little bit of glue on here. And then when I put this on, I'm going to have it hit in the front first and then roll it down into place so it pushes the glue back, and I think I'll be good to go there. It's a little asymmetric. That's all right. It's handmade, right? Okay, and then I'm going to use a spring clamp to hold that. Yeah, get a little squeeze out on the back side there. So I'll let that dry while I work on the trays.